The Dark Waters channel is for entertainment purposes only. Although information in these stories can be traced back to relevant and true sources, Dark Waters strongly discourages its viewers, listeners, and subscribers from visiting the site of incidents and encounters discussed or revealed on the show. In other words, we will not be held responsible if you are attacked by a dogman, molested by a bigfoot, bitten by vampires, chased by chupacabras, abducted by aliens, accosted by the men in black, investigated or arrested by the local law enforcement, CIA, FBI, NSA, EPA, BLM, or another alphabet group, whether on U.S. soil or abroad. Thank you for tuning in, and enjoy the show.
On this installment of the Dark Waters channel, we bring you stories about one of the most popular and terrifying cryptids, Dogman. Many of you non-believers will soon come to realize that not only is Dogman real, but he is the thing of nightmares. We proudly present to you Dogman's Revenge. These stories highlight this creature's tendencies to completely terrorize those who cross its path.
Dark Waters. I would like to open up by saying how much I appreciate your channel and the hard work you do. Based on a brief experience I had, it has opened my mind to the realm of paranormal possibilities, as well as the topic of cryptozoology. I was on a camping trip with a group of 18 guys that I grew up with.
Winter's getting colder, summer's getting warmer. Tidal wave coming across the Mexican border. Why buy a gal that's cheaper by the barrel? Just don't get busted singing Christmas carols.
All of which were either firefighters like myself, police officers, Marines, and one doctor. Basically, our group was guys who experienced with the outdoors. Even though I grew up in the suburbs, my family has a farm, and I spent much time there growing up, going fishing, hunting, camping, and hiking. The spot we were camping in was very rural and could only be accessed through a small road consisting mainly of gravel and dirt. Then there are small trails, almost like roads, that are just barely big enough to fit a car, that go from campsite to campsite throughout the park. So if I remember it correctly, it was the second night we were there. Myself and 3 of my buddies decided to walk down one of the trails towards another campsite, which was located closer to a pond. Our campsite was located further up into the wood, some 80 yards or so from the pond. Our objective was to go check out the other campsites and make a friendly visit, considering there was a few cute girls among their party, and we just wanted to say hi. Also, we had intentions of casting a few lines into the pond in hopes of snagging some catfish overnight. Well, it's well into the night hours, and we started walking down the gravel trail, armed with a few flashlights and hunting knives. I was on the left wing, looking left. I could start making out glimpses of the water shining on the pool through the trees, as well as barely starting to see the glow of the flames protruding out of our neighbor's campfire pit. What I saw next has changed my perspective on the forest, and has tested my spirit ever since. I looked to my left and I saw what looked like 2 glowing ambers from the fire. Initially, I thought it was 2 ambers that glided away from the fire into the woods. However, I quickly realized that they were way too large, and there was no way they could have glided that far away from the fire into the woods without burning out. That's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. I got a lump in my throat, and I remember my mouth drying up. I realized that this was a set of large, orange amber eyes staring directly at me. At first they were low to the ground, at about 3 to 4 feet, and whatever it was moving parallel to our trajectory, coasting along our left flank. Then I saw the eyes blink. Distance-wise, this creature was about 25 yards from us. Then, as if the eyes themselves weren't alarming enough, the creature stood up, raising definitely taller than me in height. Guessing, I would say it was 6 to 7 feet tall at least. I'm 6 feet tall. The ground was almost level to our left, with a slight decline down towards the pond. Even with this slight decline, this thing was still significantly taller than me. Now at this point, I'm really getting scared. And I don't get scared in the woods. Somewhat keeping my composure, I whispered to my friends, "Contact left. Large orange eyes, 25 yards, unknown." Now I've seen other animals at night in the woods, and when you shine a flashlight on their eyes, there's this shimmering glow. and I know that glow well. But this was not like that. These eyes were self-illuminating, unmistakably large, glowing, orange, amberish eyes. I could see it squint and blink, almost as if it was sizing us up. Or at least that's the feeling I was getting. There was just enough moonlight that I could make out its silhouette, and what I saw has changed me forever since. It was the outline of a werewolf. That's what went through my mind at the time. My mind registered fucking werewolf. I could make out sharp pointed ears. I mean really sharp. Its breath would turn into mist as it exhaled its air. It was holding onto a tree with its right arm in a way that if it had paws, it could not do. So it must have been some sort of hands that was capable of grasping and holding a tree. Now you have to realize, this all happened in a matter of seconds. Maybe 10 to 15 seconds of me being frozen, standing there staring at it. I felt like my brain was on overdrive in these moments, forever etching this image into my mind. The creepiest part is when it stood up, grabbing the tree, and turning sideways so that I could see its profile as it walked alongside of us. Just the shape of this creature as it walked along made me freak out. The only noise I heard was when it made this strange movement with its back. It was this sort of crackling noise, as if it had to adjust itself or something. Man, I don't know. All I know is that it was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. I can still see it in my mind, taking step after step with this creepy dog-like legs. It had those reverse jointed legs, just like a dog has. Since then, I've learned that they're called hawks. My one buddy saw its eyes as well, and a panic set in. So I screamed to my other two friends, "Fall back," as we all sprinted back to our campsite, which is about 60 yards away. As we returned to the campsite, coming into the firelight like bats out of hell, our other buddies were wondering what's going on. As we told them the story, and I described what I saw, one friend was skeptical and decided to go down the trail by himself to take a peek. I warned him not to go. However, he's stubborn and insisted, so we all watched over him as he walked down the trail, shining our flashlights in all directions. He got about 40 yards down the road when we heard a very loud crack. It sounded like someone literally ripped the tree in half. My buddy down the trail was looking to the left where I described the sighting. Somehow, this creature had crossed the trail without us seeing it and was now on the other side of the path. He shined his flashlight up to the right now, which were the woods behind our campfire pit. Then he screamed like a little girl and sprinted back to us. He immediately apologized to me and said, "Yes, you're right. There's a huge monster out there." So for that night, we decided to set up shop and fortify our campsite the best we could. Looking back on it, I thank God. Because seriously, I think that thing could have taken all of us if it wanted to. I live deep in the bayous of southeast Louisiana, south of Homer. Outside of work, I spend the majority of my time fishing. While out in the bayous, I've had many strange encounters. Bright lights in the sky, strange creatures in the water. But the most frightening experience I had was with the Dogman. This happened 3 weeks ago, on a Saturday morning. I was out fishing with my dog, Buck. Buck is a beautiful German Shepherd, given to me as a birthday present by my younger brother. That morning was shaping up to be a great day for fishing. The light fog had begun to burn off the lake, and I trolled along the shores casting for redfish. Then I began to troll north of one of the canals. Buck had been laying there on the boat, taking a nap the entire time. As soon as we hit the canal, he scented something. Now this canal is bordered by nothing but marshlands, but up ahead there was a section of the canal that was surrounded by light forest, and beyond that was a roadway. Buck began to bark as we reached the forested area. It was not an aggressive bark, but more of a warning to me that something was up ahead. I decided to move away from the front of the boat. I'm not sure why I did it. I just moved and cranked the rear motor. That is when something large and black moved in the wood line. This thing was a massive animal. As it walked, I could see its muscles in its shoulders and its hind legs. It was on all fours, and as I would soon learn, this was no ordinary animal. It shadowed us in the tree line as we moved along, and it seemed to focus on Buck. Buck's warning bark suddenly turned ferocious. Then it turned and stuck its head out of the tree line, showing itself and growling at the same time. This was not a dog. It was some type of large wolf. The growl was deep, deeper than anything I'd ever heard. I could feel the vibrations in my chest, legs, and arms. And to my surprise, Buck was not intimidated. He barked even louder. This head was a wolf head. A black timber wolf is what it looked like. But it was 5 times bigger than any wolf or dog I had ever seen. My whole encounter was no more than 5 minutes from start to finish, but it felt like forever. After seeing this giant wolf head poking out from between the trees and this animal trying to intimidate Buck, I was in shock. I just expected to see the head of a big dog, not a wolf. That is when the fear kicked in, and Buck barked at me as if he was saying, "Don't you see this big wolf thing? What are you waiting for, stupid? Go." At least in that moment, that is how I perceived his bark, and I punched it, speeding away from the area in the boat. 2 weeks later, I went back to that area. I asked people who had houses on that same canal if they had seen a big black dog. One man said, "Son, that ain't no dog. You and I both know that. It comes through here every now and then, but if you don't bother it, it don't bother you." Thanks for meeting with me and my family to talk about our encounter with the Dogman. What happened to us should be shared with others so they can have knowledge of these creatures and what not to do if they see one of them. My 12-year-old son and I were out hunting on the outskirts of our city. It was his first time out, and I really didn't expect us to take down anything that day. It was more of a father-son outing. We left before daylight Sunday morning and headed to my hunting blind. When we arrived, we sat there until daybreak, having the most interesting conversation about this little girl named Elizabeth. It was shaping up to be an awesome father and son day. Essentially, that was all I wanted, was to spend some time with my son, not what happened next. As the sun began to light up the woods, Josh got excited. He trained his scope out into the clearing, then mumbled, "I'm going to get me a buck today." I smiled and reached down for a bottle of water and some beef jerky that was in my backpack, and was completely startled when I heard him fire 2 shots. Looking up, I saw a buck in full stride near the end of the clearing. Right behind it was the largest dog I've ever seen. I need to pause and go back for a second and share what my son told me he saw in the 5 to 10 second time frame in which I was fumbling in my backpack looking for beef jerky and water. According to Josh, the buck darted out of the tree line in full stride. He trained the scope, then he noticed it was being chased by something big and black. Josh described it as a bear with a dog face. He fired 2 shots at the buck, and one hit the dog man. Oh my God. This thing came to a sliding stop and began smelling the air. Then it stood up on 2 legs. I'm not sure why it was not able to scent us. In hindsight, I figured it was the scent killer gold that we use. But thank God this thing didn't see us up in that blind. I stood there for a few minutes, sniffing in the air, then walked off into the wood line. Josh and I, now freaking out about what we had just seen, climbed down out of the blind and ran back the 150 yards to the car. When we arrived back at the truck, I could smell the scent of wet dog and old meat. But I was in such a rush to get Josh away from that area that we hopped in quickly and drove off. Arriving at our house, which was only about a mile away from that area, Josh was all questions. "What was that, Dad? It looked like a monster. It looked like a werewolf. I simply told him, I have no clue, son. At this point in time, I'm thinking that my son and I have a great story to tell, but we had gotten away from all the danger. That night when my wife and I settled into bed, around 11 p.m., I told her what happened, and her reaction was not what I wanted or expected. But soon she would realize I was telling the truth. Around 4 a.m., I was woken by a crashing sound outside in the backyard. Then, all I could hear was Josh's footsteps as he entered our bedroom in a full sprint, leaping damn near from the doorway into our bed, saying, "It's outside, it's outside." Immediately, I knew by the terror on his face what he was referring to. I stumbled to the floor, rushing from the bed to my closet to grab my shotgun. And after a few twists and turns, I headed to the back of the house towards our sliding glass door, turned on the floodlights, and looked out into the backyard. Scanning the yard, I couldn't see anything. But going outside was not an option, because I saw that thing earlier. And if it was indeed this creature, we would need way more than a shotgun. Just then my wife startled me, asking me what was going on. And I turned my back to the door to answer her. As I tried to explain to her what Josh was upset about, she began to stare past me. Then the color drained from her face, and her eyes got large. She screamed and ran back towards the bedroom. Turning around, I could feel this creature's presence. And to see it at my home was so terrifying. It was right there in the backyard, standing on two legs, hands down by its side, with its palms open. Its fingers or claws moving like it was playing a piano. It was panting hard like it had just stopped running. And the thick saliva was dripping from its closed mouth. It looked straight at me through the sliding glass door. And then its ears began to twitch and move, each moving independently. As I stood there, staring into the eyes of this death machine for what felt like 10 minutes, I didn't know what to do. The glass door wouldn't stop this thing if it wanted to come in my house, and the shotgun wouldn't kill it before it got to me and my family. I can only describe its eyes as being the most intimidating thing I've ever seen. This creature had these piercing yellow eyes with large black pupils, and I felt like it was trying to intimidate me, like it was trying to make a point to me. All I could think was to show no fear, but my body was trembling. My hands were shaking to the point I dropped the shotgun. That's when it broke eye contact with me, cutting its eyes to the right side of my yard and sniffing the air. Then it took 2 quick leaps and was gone out of sight. Honestly, I collapsed to the floor. My body was just overwhelmed with adrenaline, and I was feeling dizzy. When I entered the bedroom, my wife and son were in the closet with my rifle. And that was how the first night ended, with all us huddled in one bedroom. Me on the floor at the foot of the bed with my shotgun. The following morning, I called into work and went to my neighbor's property to talk to him. Devin is a bit of a wild individual, but he loves my son Josh to death. I knew if anyone would believe me, it was him. When I arrived, he was drinking beer. Now it's 9 a.m. in the morning, and Devin is known to drink, but not like that. He looked disturbed and worried. As I proceeded to explain to him what I saw last night, his eyes lit up, and I could tell he wanted to share something as well. He stood up, looked me square in the eyes, and said, "I saw it last night too." Devin said his dog was killed by some type of large wolf. Now Devin breeds dogs for a living, and the dog that was killed was a bull mastiff, and it was his pride and joy. The dog had been torn into pieces, and he witnessed what happened. Devin was distraught and talked about how there was nothing he could do. He was frozen with fear as his dog was killed. That evening, I told my wife everything Devin and I discussed and tried to reassure her that this was a one-time incident. But again, I couldn't have been any more wrong. That night at 4:15 a.m., I was awakened from my sleep on the sofa by this feeling that something was watching me. You know how it is when you wake up afraid but not sure what you're afraid of because your senses are not completely intact yet? Well, that is what I was feeling, dread and fear. But it was not from a dream. This fear woke me up from my sleep. Looking around the room, I saw nothing, and I was just about to settle back to sleep when I saw a figure move quickly from the window and towards the back of the house. Then I heard my wife scream, and she came running into the living room. "It's outside! It's outside!" She was terrified. Josh, now awakened from his mother's screams, came barging into the room, and we all huddled there in the living room as I dialed 911. All I could think to tell the 911 operator was someone was trying to break into our home. When the sheriff's deputies arrived, we walked around the house, and on the ground there were humongous canine prints. And at my bedroom window, the screen was soaking wet with some type of saliva or spit. My wife explained to me that she had woken up because of a scratching sound at the window and saw what looked like a dog-headed creature licking the window screen. As we walked around the house, the sheriff's deputy looked at me and said, "I don't know what was at your house, but I do know it wasn't a person." They assigned extra patrols to our area for that night, and again, we settled in to sleep. I haven't had any new activity to this day, but now, on weekends, when I'm in my backyard cutting my grass, I get this eerie feeling that something's watching me from the tree line. I don't know if I'm paranoid or if I'm going crazy, but I can't shake the feeling that that thing is there, watching me, waiting for an opportunity to get me.